Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Zishan Isaac with Zishan on air every Sunday, 6 p.m. and onward, all over the social media world, globally as well as locally with our legacy media. And I welcome you all. First of all, again, today we got a lot of news to cover. But at the same time, the main idea here is that I report, you decide, and then I also provide different types of news analysis on different areas of the news as well, because it's important that we continue to look at the news based on what's happening, and then at the same time, based on how the world is also changing with regards to a lot that is happening. And with that, I'm going to share obviously the main slides that we have, and I'm just pulling that up. So today there's just a little technical glitch, so I would just bear with me for a second. And at the same time, a lot of people, they also ask me that how should we connect with you, Zishan? So it's very easy. The best way to connect is through the social media or by calling here at the studio. But during the live programming of social media, the best way to connect is just through making comments on YouTube Live or Facebook Live. And when you make those comments, I can certainly see those comments live. And whatever you want to say, just say it, because it's your opinion, and opinion matters. And that's where I want to make sure that people they understand that every opinion matters, and every um, person has a right to their opinion. And speaking of rights, a lot of protests happened this weekend. Millions of people marched all over the US. And not only that, but this rally, this was actually the No Kings protest, was happening in 2,500 cities all over the US. And this is where the last No Kings protest against Trump was about 5 million. So this time, 2 million more people showed up. And the analysis and a lot of commentary and political pundits and all those who follow news and are literally focused on the US politics as well as global politics, they're saying that the next protest would even be larger and bigger than the current protest. So as you can see the images on social media, if you have not subscribed my YouTube channel, please do, and follow me on Facebook Live as well as YouTube Live. And YouTube and Facebook both are accessible to you, and then other platforms as well, X platform, what have you. So you can see millions of people, as you can see on these images. Nationwide No Kings protest against Trump. Millions of Americans took to the streets today, and King's Media has reported nearly 7 million people basically were protesting in many cities nationwide. And all protests happened very peacefully. And that's where they were interviewing all these people who were protesting and these protesters. So there was this woman. She is a teacher. She mentioned that I'm CTA. I'm a teacher, teach kindergarten. So she was specifically asked if she belonged to some groups like Antifa, or which basically means anti-fascist. But then, according to President Trump, that some people who are part of that group are violent, and there was no violence as the interviewer continued to ask this question. Everything that's going in this country is horrible. That's one person on the wheelchair said. There are no clashes. There's no violence. This rally, which was happening right in downtown Los Angeles, happened very peacefully. And as you can see, all these cities, Chicago, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., New York City, Boston, Nashville, Los Angeles, and Concord in Massachusetts. So a lot of these cities had these protests. Um, Also, a Supreme Court ruling on voting rights could boost Republicans' redistricting efforts. A Supreme Court case over Louisiana's congressional map could determine the future of Voting Rights Act protections against racial discrimination and allow Republicans to draw 19 more House seats. So this is interesting as the Texas, I would say, redistricting that triggered other redistricting retaliations or reactions from Democrat governors. Now, the Supreme Court ruling is an important ruling because that will, in fact, help Republicans in their redistricting efforts, as reported by NPR. If map makers in those states are no longer required under Section 2 to draw districts where racial minority voters have a realistic opportunity of electing their preferred candidate, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia, Missouri, North Carolina, and Texas could end up with fewer Democratic representatives in Congress. Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee could lose all of theirs, the report finds. So, this is an important report. How the Supreme Court overturning Section 2 could lead to a redistricting, quote, free for all, unquote. In the Louisiana case, a lower court ordered the state's Republican controlled legislature to draw a new congressional map after a group of black voters sued under Section 2. Section 2, quote, ensures all communities of color can still participate equally in the voting process and elect candidates who reflect their interest, unquote, says Alana Odoms, is executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, of Louisiana, whose attorneys are helping to represent those black voters. Quote, and if communities of color are not able to do that, we stand to lose what I think most of us believe is so fundamental to our democracy, which is equal participation, equal opportunity, unquote. So this is where the GOP effort could be bolstered by a Supreme Court ruling that eliminates long-standing Section 2 protections against the dilution of the collective power of racial minority voters. America is at the crossroads. And this is where this time today, the protests were even bigger than last time. And that's what would happen. And why? Because of the authoritative nature of President Trump's administration. Make no mistake, this is where we are. And if people don't protest, they don't speak up, silence means consent. And that is exactly why a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines, because they have definitely not taking interest in politics, and people are losing interest in politics because politicians on both sides of the aisle are not representing the people's issues properly, and their voices are not being heard. So there is this organic movement also happening within the United States, because it's a very big country. We have a big country. So this is where a lot of issues locally at the state level, and then obviously at the national federal level. As much as 30% of the congressional Black caucus and 11% of the congressional Hispanic caucus could be lost. It all leads to a possibility of Republicans cementing one-party control of the House for at least a generation, says Cliff Albright, co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter Fund. Let me repeat this. It all leads to a possibility of Republicans cementing one-party rule. Remember, what other country has one-party rule? China. CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And I'm not laughing because it's a laughing matter. I'm just baffled that how can we are ending up in a situation where even people like Cliff are making these statements, because it's happening as we speak. Quote, part of the point that we're trying to make with this report is that what happens in the South doesn't just stay in the South, unquote, quote unquote. Albright adds, quote, this racial gerrymandering has the ability to not just disempower, disenfranchise Black voters and to eliminate Black elected officials and Latino elected officials. What happens in these states impacts the entire country, unquote. 2 years ago, the Supreme Court rejected a similar argument by Alabama Republicans. Quote, the court could affirm the Voting Rights Act as it did in 2023 in Allen versus Milligan, unquote, says Atiba Ellis, a professor and an associate dean at Case Western Reserve University's law school. Quote, but many observers, and I am one of them, have been concerned about the court becoming more and more cynical about race conscious remedies to address long-standing civil rights wrongs. And this decision has the potential to be the tipping point where the court declares unconstitutional or heavily restricts the ability for Congress to create remedies that promote multiracial democracy, unquote. Very heavy words, but at the end of the day, these are not heavy words. There's a long-standing issue of civil rights and racial discrimination and racial issues in this country, and that's where, for the past many decades, people fought for their rights. So America is facing the same issue, and we're at the crossroads again. Associated Press AP has reported US News that ICE's use of full body restraints during deportations raised concerns over inhumane treatment, as you can see in the picture. And some people, let's be honest, could be very violent, but at the same time, there is also this humanitarian concern and inhumane treatment. ICE is cracking down on Chicago. Some Chicagoans are fighting back, as you can see on the picture. And the New York Times has reported this woman was detained on October 10th. It was one of many turbulent episodes to erupt in Chicago in recent days. Federal agents from Immigration, Custom Enforcement, and the Border Patrol have roamed the city and suburbs making arrests, often pulling up to people walking along sidewalks, stopping them and questioning them. New York Times has further reported, as the intensity of the Trump administration's immigration crackdown has risen, residents of Chicago are increasingly pushing back with fury. In the last several weeks, Chicagoans have formed volunteer groups to monitor their neighborhoods for federal immigration agents, posting alerts on Facebook and in Signal group chats when agents are seen. And here, people are carrying milk jugs, sometimes used to rinse eyes after tear gas, as they linked arms after a clash with federal agents, the Brighton Park neighborhood in early October. Unfortunate events, and you can see tear gas, and people are covering their noses and running away. As the agents left, they released tear gas, apparently without warning, sending people coughing and running for cover. Among those affected by the gas were 13 Chicago Police Department officers. The police department said, and at least one officer was seen rinsing his eyes out with water from a neighbor's garden hose. And then someone is taking a picture, captured a federal agent where near a train station over the weekend, these masked federal officers. And they are trying to do their jobs, but they are under tremendous pressure from the Trump administration. AP Associated Press, the Nigerian man described being roused with other detainees in September in the middle of the night. US Immigration Custom Enforcement officers clasped shackles on their hands and feet, he said, and told them they were being sent to Ghana, even though none of them was from there. This is another interesting situation. People, they are not from that country. They are completely, I would say, alien, or they do not recognize those countries, and they could be from some other country, and then they are being deported to a completely unknown country that they do not know of. So that's another signal and the message that the Trump administration is sending, that people should self-deport. So otherwise, people could end up in these jails and these cells for weeks and months. We have many stories, and that person could be deported to a country not recognized by him or his family, and then the whereabouts of the person who may get detained. When they asked to speak to their attorney, he said the officer refused and straight-jacketed the already shackled man in full-body restraint suits, called the RAP, that's what it's called, then loaded them onto a plane for the 16-hour flight to West Africa, referred to as the, quote, the burrito, or, quote, the bag, unquote. The RAP has become a harrowing part of deportations for some immigrants. Quote, it was just like a kidnapping, unquote, the Nigerian man, who's part of a federal lawsuit, told the Associated Press in an interview from the detainment camp in which he and other deportees were being held in Ghana. Like others placed in the restraints, interviewed by the AP, he spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of reprisals. So this is also the situation where people should always be following the law and at the same time, especially immigration law. And people should contact their attorneys before they get in trouble. That's just my recommendation. I'm not an attorney, but based on the news reports and analysis and what I'm seeing and following in the news, this is something which should be looked into seriously by individuals and by families, and take this seriously, because this is where information always helps people. Lack of information and information knowledge may create confusion and even fear in communities. Early morning on Wednesday, September 24th, he said officers tied his hands and legs, placed him into the bag, and drove him 4 hours to the border. When he refused to sign the deportation papers, Pineda alleges officers broke his right arm, and gave him a black eye before driving him back another 4 hours in the coat bag, unquote. That was reported by the AP. The AP Associated Press was unable to independently confirm how he was injured. Pineda's video shows him with a cast on his arm and bruising on his face. So that's another thing, that how he got bruised and got injured. The next day, Thursday, September 25th, they tied him up again and put him in the bag and drove him to the border, where Mexican immigration officials turned him away. Quote, 8 hours there and back, and they don't give me food or water or anything, unquote. He said in the video, which his wife shared with the AP. Quote, please help me, unquote. He was ultimately deported to Mexico, Ochoa said. ICE did not respond to multiple requests for comment from the AP regarding Pineda's case. The wrap's manufacturer says it's intended device the device to be a lifesaver for law enforcement confronting erratic people who were physically attacking officers or harming themselves. So that's what the wrap, and it's been in use for quite some time now. In fact, I was reading it has been in use for a couple of decades. As the U.S. immigration officials move aggressively to meet the present deportation goals, advocates and attorneys for immigration are echoing the concerns of the government's own civil rights inquiry that ICE officers aren't trained on how to use the restraints. And this should be a last resort, one person reported, quote, this should be a last resort type of restraint after they have already tried other things, unquote, said Fatma Maroof, a Texas A&M law professor who has sued ICE over its use of the device. Quote, just being bound up like that can inflict a lot of psychological harm, unquote. So this is where you can see the pictures in this image surveillance video provided by Jefferson City Correctional Center. Jailers examined Othel Moore Jr. as the Jefferson City Correctional Center in Jefferson City, Montana, I believe, on December 8, 2023, who, according to an autopsy, asphyxiated in the wrap restraint. So some people can certainly have some very serious conditions, or even in this case, this is what they are reporting. And then in this image, this is the person from the Ochoa, where his arm basically shows that cast, and he speaks during an interview from the ICE detention center in Florence, Arizona, on September 29, 2025, as reported by Xiomara Ochoa, his wife, via AP, Associated Press. Carrying me like a corpse. That basically was reported, and you can look it up on Google as well. And this is where ICE and DHS would not answer detailed questions from the AP and refused a request for the government's policy for when and how to use the wrap. Quote, they bundled me and my colleagues, unquote, he said, tied us up in a straight jacket. So, quote, the use of restraint on detainees during deportation flights has been long-standing standard ICE protocol and an essential measure to ensure the safety and well-being of both detainees and the officers/agents accompanying them, unquote. Tricia McLaughlin, DHS's spokesperson, said in an email to AP, quote, our practices align with those followed by other relevant authorities and is fully in line with established legal standards, unquote. The agency would not specify those authorities or describe its practices. So that was the statement by the DHS's spokesperson, and this is where the information came from his wife, Mrs. Pineda. The use of the quote, the use of these devices is inhumane and incompatible with our nation's fundamental values, unquote, said Noah Barron, an attorney for the West African deportees. So a lot of these lawsuits are happening and then these protests. So America is at unrest at this point based on what is happening with this. ICE agreed with the internal findings on some points. A then DHS official involved in the review said, but challenged the notion that the RAP, that's what it's called, should be classified as a quote 4-point restraint, unquote, a designation that would place more limitations on its use. The person spoke on condition of anonymity because they weren't authorized to discuss the inquiry. But news comes out, and this is another area where the Trump administration is uh, making sure that that kind of news should also not get to the news outlets, and then they should not release it. And that's where the journalists and news reporters and these organizations are also under a lot of pressure. However, they got to do their job. Quote, without changes to the current training and the lack of policy, CRCL has serious concern about ISIS's continued use of the RAP, unquote. Wrote the report's authors, who cited a news article mentioning lawsuits claiming the device has led to deaths. Very unfortunate. So this is where we are, at this point, looking at all of this situation. And the government purchasing records showed that two Trump administrations have been responsible for about 91% of the spending. ICE would not provide AP with records documenting its use of the RAP despite multiple requests, and it's not clear how frequently it has been used in the current and prior administrations. And that's where the ICE is not tracking the RAP's use as required by federal law when officers use force. That's the advocate's concern. Used by police and in jails. Last year, police officers in Virginia Beach, Virginia, placed Roland Hill in the RAP, says he was being combative during an arrest at a convenience store. The officers left Hill in the device where they dropped him at the jail. Video from the jail shows deputies punching the RAP, immobilized Hill in the head and back. Hill died in a hospital, and while the RAP's exact role is unknown, Hill's death was ruled a homicide by, quote, positional and mechanical asphyxia due to restraint with neck and torso compression, unquote. Three of the deputies are now charged with his murder, and five were removed from their jobs. Also, last year in Missouri, prosecutors charged five jailers in the death of Othel Moore Jr., who, according to an autopsy, asphyxiated in the RAP. Jailhouse footage showed Moore, who had been sprayed with tear gas and placed in a, quote, spit mask, unquote, covering his face, repeatedly told officers he couldn't breathe. The RAP first appeared in law enforcement in the late 1990s, as I was mentioning. It's been there for a couple of decades now. So the RAP first appeared in the law enforcement in law enforcement in the late 1990s, presented as an alternative to tying a subject's hands and feet together in a practice known as, quote, hog tying, unquote. It first found widespread use in California jails, and today it's used by more than 1,800 departments and facilities around the country, according to the manufacturer, which says it has sold more than 10,000 devices. And then there are some other cases that have drawn little media attention, such as the 2020 case of Alberto Pena, who was jailed on misdemeanor criminal mischief charge after getting drunk and damaged the walls and doors at his parents' home outside Rio Grande City, Texas. The 30-year-old became erratic on the way to the Starr County Jail, beating his own head against the inside of the patrol unit and later hit the wall of his cell. Deputies placed Pena in the RAF for more than 2 hours, where he repeatedly cried out for help and complained he could not breathe, but he was left unattended in the device for significant periods of time, court records show, and no medical attention was provided for his self-inflicted head injuries. It was the most painful thing I've been through, said the man, adding he was restrained most of the 10-hour flight. And this was the other incident. Forget the assault, forget the broken jaw, just the RAP itself was hurtful, unquote. ISIS current use of the RAB comes in an unprecedented wave of mass federal immigration officers grabbing suspected immigrants off the street and mounting accusations that the Trump administration has dehumanized them, including by subjecting them to cruel and unusual detention conditions. ISIS use of the RAB has continued despite a 2023 report by DHS's Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, or CRCL, that raised serious concerns over the lack of policies governing its use. So this is where it's up to the people, and it's up to the voters. It's up to uh, those administration officials where proper training, in some cases, it may be needed, but you got to keep an eye. So it's about human life. The Wall Street, now going over to the global news, the Wall Street has reported Trump praises Netanyahu as, quote, not easy, unquote, but, quote, great, unquote. Great. So he's not easy, he said of the prime minister, but that's what makes him great. That's what President Trump said of Bibi Netanyahu. Thank you very much, Bibi. Great job, unquote. The president said, looking at Netanyahu sitting in the audience, because President Trump went to Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and addressed them, and then went to Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, met President Sisi and others. Trump chides Israeli leaders for speaking too long, that was reported, and then also two lawmakers removed from Knesset after attempting to disrupt Trump's speech. There were two lawmakers from an Arab Jewish party, quote, that was very efficient, unquote, Trump said as they were escorted from the room. The men held up a sign that said, quote, recognize Palestine, unquote, before being removed footage from the Knesset video feed showed. Trump said international pressure meant Israel had to end war. President Trump, in his speech to Israel's parliament, suggested that international pressure played a part in bringing about the current ceasefire. Quote, I said to him, you know, the world is big and it's strong, and Ron, ultimately the world wins, unquote. He said, referring to conversations with key Israeli leaders such as Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer, a Netanyahu confidant. Quote, and we don't have to worry about that now, but there was getting to be a period of time over the last few months, you know, the world wanted peace, unquote, he said. Quote, it was getting bad. It was getting heated. The timing of this was brilliant, unquote. The Wall Street Journal has reported Trump's big gamble on tackling the Middle East's intractable problems. And this is where the neoconservatives of George W. Bush administrations had hoped to spread democracy by overthrowing Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. They ended up spreading a devastating insurgency that took years to put down. Then President Joe Biden's plan to secure an end to the war in Gaza and leveraged that to create progress toward a Palestinian state, and an expansion of Arab diplomatic ties with Israel never got off the ground. Even the relatively targeted 1993 Oslo Accords, which aimed to chart a course to peace between Israel and the Palestinians, ultimately fell apart amid pressure from extremists on both sides. Already cracks showing the second stage of Trump's peace plan. It's basically a ceasefire plan. His second stop Monday was Egypt for a summit of nearly two dozen countries to show support for the plan. Representatives from across the Europe and the Middle East were there, yet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hadn't been asked to attend. Trump, and you would think that he could have attended. All these countries and these governments that are there, they're not representing the Muslim world. They're not representing the people's will. They are just doing this for their own political gain and for their own political reasons. So there's a lot of uproar. That's the voice. That's what the main street is saying. So we should know this as well. The Wall Street Journal has also reported Gaza hostages are freed, ending 2-year captivity. So a lot of people were happy, and on both sides, because many Palestinians who have been in jail for many years and they couldn't see their children for years, and even those who were born while they were in the jail because they get arrested while their wives were pregnant. So that was something good that came out of it. But at the same time, there are a lot of questions. The question is whether ordinary Israelis will keep pressure on the Netanyahu government, as this report is talking about, to end the war now that the hostages have been released. He said, quote, how will the Israeli public deal with, feel, and think about Gaza, unquote. Hadiya said, quote, this is the big question. Are they really people of peace or people of war? Question mark. End of quote. And the other people said, Oren said it would require a great deal of U.S. diplomacy and demand a lot of Trump's time to overcome the challenges ahead. Analysts are worried a president who often jumps from issue to issue could lose interest before the job is finished. Before he left Israel, Trump was already telling Special Envoy Steve Witkoff it was time to give attention to a nuclear deal with Iran, but not before settling the war in Ukraine. And this is where he's standing right next to President Sisi, and President Sisi is in the middle, and President Erdogan is on his right side of President Sisi, and then some other leaders as well, and President Trump, as you can see in the pictures. And a lot of other people who are praising Trump are also talking about, obviously, Trump's ability to secure the release of the rest of the hostages still alive in Gaza and bring a ceasefire to the enclave was a major diplomatic accomplishment that showed how tides are shifting in the region. Quote, there is a lot of fatigue around the issue of Palestine, unquote, said Tahani Mustafa, a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Quote, regional states were the ones to also demand Hamas's disarmament simply because they also have an interest in making sure that things are quiet in the occupied territories, unquote. And as these embracing this moment, and as Palestinians were also waiting for their prisoners' release, the Washington Post has reported Trump meets Zelensky between Putin call and summit. The Ukrainian leader is seeking long-range missiles to use against Russia in a war Trump is eager to end. So that is still continuing. And then within a week, Hamas attacks Israeli troops in Gaza, threatening fragile ceasefire. That was reported by the Wall Street Journal. However, Hamas's officials are saying in other news outlets that have reported, all the major ones from BBC to Reuters and others, that Hamas is saying we do not have any contact with those fighters in southern Gaza and Gaza. So there's already this ceasefire that has been violated, and there was some bombardment that happened. Hamas's armed wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, denied mounting any attack on Israeli troops on Sunday and said contact with its fighters in Israeli-controlled southern Gaza has been cut off since March, when Israel took control of the area. Quote, we affirm our full commitment to implementing everything that was agreed, foremost among which is a ceasefire in all areas of the Gaza Strip, unquote, the group said. Flare-ups of fighting between the two sides have occurred several times since the ceasefire came into effect, underscoring its fragility. Key details of the ceasefire are still to be completed, and an array of obstacles are already arising. And unfortunately, this is where we are. And Wall Street Journal has reported this, and Israel and Hamas have also continued to basically fight, and fighting is still going on sporadically, and in some cases, Hamas has now returned a total of 12 bodies of hostages. 16 remain in Gaza. Israeli officials have accused Hamas of delaying the handover of the remaining bodies, which is required by the ceasefire agreement. In response, Israel has delayed the opening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt and slowed the pace of humanitarian aid entering the enclave to pressure the group to release more bodies. This is all Wall Street Journal reporting, but then other Arabic channels like Al Jazeera and others, they're saying that originally it was 600 trucks that should be released, only 300 or even less were released by the state of Israel. So there is mistrust between both parties. Very fragile situation. Netanyahu's office on Saturday night said the crossings opening would depend on whether Hamas was implementing its part of the ceasefire agreement. The Rafah crossing was last open early this year. According to the current agreement, Gazans are supposed to be able to enter and exit the enclave through the Rafah crossing in coordination with Egypt. So this is where we are, and I wanted to cover this in length so we should know what's happening. And with that, I would like to sign off, but quickly mention about our key advertisers, Affordable Insurance of Texas, AITinsurance.com. Please visit them, AITinsurance.com, and I'll call them 713-785-4000 for auto insurance needs, commercial, business, homeowners insurance, commercial insurance, and auto insurance. Affordable Insurance of Texas, AITinsurance.com, and call 713-785-4000. I would also like to talk about Roop Sari Palace. They have new shipment. New shipment has arrived from Pakistan, and you should go there. A lot of people are also shopping for different festivals. Please contact Roop Sari Palace, and Roop Sari are located at Hillcroft, and you can call them at 832-267-0065. 832-267-0065, Roop Sari Palace. RoopSari.com is the website, and new shipment from Pakistan has arrived. Prince Jewelers Houston, they are at Hillcroft Shopping Plaza. They have heavy jewelry sets for brides and also different necklaces, all gold jewelry, and even light sets, and for all different types of formal occasions and even for weddings. Call Prince Jewelers Houston 281-777-1457, 281-777-1457, or visit 5901 Hillcroft in Hillcroft Shopping Plaza. And with that, I would like to sign off and continue with the Legacy Media. And again, thank you so much for joining in, and please subscribe my YouTube channel as well. Thank you.